Picture this: September 19th, 1935, Harlem, New York. A man walks up to the most famous nightclub in America wearing a suit that cost him 3 months' salary. His shoes are polished so bright they reflect the streetlights. He's dressed better than most of the white businessmen who walk through these doors every night. But when he reaches the entrance, the doorman steps in front of him and says 5 words that will change Harlem forever. Get back to where you belong. That man was Bumpy Johnson. And what happened next wasn't a fight, wasn't a shooting, wasn't anything you'd expect from one of Harlem's most powerful criminals. What happened next was something far more dangerous. But before I tell you how Bumpy Johnson broke down the walls of the Cotton Club without throwing a single punch, you need to understand just how insulting that moment really was. The Cotton Club sat on West 142nd Street, right in the heart of Harlem. Every single night, wealthy white people from downtown Manhattan would travel uptown to watch Duke Ellington perform, to hear Cab Calloway sing, to experience what they called exotic black entertainment. The irony? Not a single black person was allowed to sit in that audience. The musicians were black, the waiters were black, the cooks were black, the people who made the Cotton Club, were all black. But the customers? Whites only, no exceptions. So when Bumpy Johnson walked up to that door on September 19th, he wasn't just another guy trying to get into a club. He was being rejected from an establishment that existed entirely because of black talent, black labor, and black culture, all while sitting in the middle of a black neighborhood. The doorman, a guy named Thomas Murphy, didn't even recognize who he was talking to. He just saw a blackface and immediately went into his routine.
Where do you think you're going, boy? This club is for white patrons only. We don't serve coloreds here, except as entertainers and staff. You need to get back to Harlem where you belong. Get back to Harlem where you belong. The Cotton Club wasn't Harlem. Murphy was literally telling a black man to leave Harlem while standing in Harlem. The racism was so deep, so automatic, that it didn't even make logical sense anymore.
Now, Bumpy Johnson could have made a scene. He could have forced his way in. He had the power, the reputation, the muscle to turn that doorway into a battlefield. But here's what separates intelligence from impulse. Johnson understood that fighting Murphy would accomplish nothing. Behind him, a line of white customers was watching, waiting to see if this uppity colored man would cause trouble. If Johnson fought back, he'd be arrested, beaten, or both, and those white customers would go home with a story about how they saw a black man put in his place. So Johnson did something that required more self-control than most people possess. He smiled. Not a real smile, but the kind of cold, calculated expression that says, "I'm memorizing your face." He held Murphy's gaze for exactly 3 seconds, just long enough that Murphy's confidence cracked slightly, just long enough that Murphy sensed this wasn't over. Then Johnson turned around and walked away. But here's where the story gets interesting. Johnson didn't go home. He didn't forget about it. He walked through Harlem for 15 minutes, letting his anger cool, letting his mind work. And he ended up outside the Savoy Ballroom, watching black families walk into a club that actually welcomed them. And standing there, watching his own people enjoy themselves in their own space, Johnson had a realization that would change everything. The Cotton Club was making hundreds of thousands of dollars every year from black talent and black labor. It was taking Harlem's culture, Harlem's creativity, Harlem's reputation, and giving almost nothing back except minimum wage jobs. White businessmen owned it. White people profited from it, and they maintained their whites-only policy because they believed black Harlem couldn't do anything about it. Individual black people couldn't force their way in. Black musicians needed the money too badly to boycott. Black workers couldn't afford to quit during the Depression. The Cotton Club's owners had calculated that black people were powerless. But what they hadn't calculated was what would happen if someone with Bumpy Johnson's resources, connections, and strategic mind decided to prove them wrong. Johnson walked to a payphone and made 3 calls. First, to his attorney Theodore Green. Second, to Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of policy, who controlled massive gambling operations throughout Harlem. Third, to Adam Clayton Powell Sr., the minister of Abyssinian Baptist Church, one of Harlem's most powerful legitimate leaders. By midnight, 15 people were sitting in the back room of a speakeasy on 133rd Street. Policy operators, union officials, ministers, black doctors and lawyers who'd all experienced their own humiliations at white establishments. Johnson stood at the head of the table and spoke in his characteristic quiet voice that made everyone lean forward to hear. "The Cotton Club turned me away tonight because I'm colored. The doorman called me boy and told me to get back to Harlem where I belong. The irony is that the Cotton Club is in Harlem. It's on our streets, employs our musicians, our waiters, our cooks. It makes money from being in Harlem and featuring black entertainment, but it won't let black people sit in the audience." Johnson paused, letting that sink in. Then he continued, "But here's what the Cotton Club's owners don't understand. They're vulnerable in ways they haven't considered. They depend on black labor. Every single person who makes that establishment function is colored. They depend on being in Harlem. That's their entire appeal to white customers. And they depend on us tolerating their presence, on us not organizing resistance." Then Johnson laid out